This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg here in South Africa. My name is Evan Jansen. The show, of course, live. It's broadcast from our studios in Auckland Park. We're also streaming live on YouTube right now, where the whole show is always available on demand on our YouTube channel. Now, it's Reconciliation Day here in South Africa. It's a day we come together as a nation and see where we've come from and also what we've achieved together. Also, a bit later, our contributing editor, William Walker, spoke to EFF leader Julius Malema as the party concludes their elective conference in the Free State today. But first, let's get the day's news from Katrina Miller.
Well, hello and welcome to Newsroom. I'm Katrina Milan, and let's just take a look at those top stories this morning. South Africans will celebrate the Day of Reconciliation today with a national event at the Nome Museum in KwaZulu-Natal. Thousands of people are expected to be part of the event, which will also see the official opening of a bridge that joins the museum and the Blood River Monument. President Jacob Zuma is expected to deliver the keynote address. A live broadcast on this channel is scheduled to start at 10:30. Now, as the country celebrates Reconciliation Day, residents of Marikana, including mine workers, have appealed to government to fast-track developmental programs in the area. They insist that government should play a more active role in fostering good relations amongst workers, irrespective of their political or union affiliation. The Northwest government is hosting the province's Reconciliation Day at Marikana in an effort to improve service delivery and address safety and security concerns. EFF leader Julius Malema has once again been accused of dictatorship tendencies. The party's inaugural conference in Bloemfontein descended into chaos last night after some members from Gauteng objected against delegates from other provinces who were making nominations according to a list which was apparently prepared with Malema's approval. Gauteng argued that the practice is not in line with conference guidelines, which were distributed to structures months before the conference. And then down under. We move down under. 2 hostages killed in a siege at a central Sydney cafe have been hailed as heroes, willing to lay down their lives so others might live. In a church service mourning their deaths. Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott says the lone gunman behind the fatal Sydney cafe siege was well known to the authorities because of his long history of violent crime, infatuation with extremism and mental instability. Abbott says the Iranian-born refugee Manharan Monas, who died along with 2 hostages after security forces stormed the cafe, sought to cloak his actions with the symbolism of the Islamic State.
It's absolutely devastating that could happen, and that just anyone going about their business, going to get a coffee in the morning, and to have something so tragic and horrible happen to them and their families and extended families is just horrific.
I think it's the first siege we've had here, or first terror attack in Australia, and it's I feel terrible for the victims, of course. The government, obviously, I don't think too many people have any sympathy for it. But you know, I think we've got to get on with it.
Well, remember, all those top stories and more are available on our Newsroom Facebook page. Then also, our journalists are out and about all over the country today. You can follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Eben, back to you.
Thank you very much, Katrina. 16 December is celebrated and acknowledged differently by different communities here in South Africa. Under the previous white nationalist government, the day was also celebrated as a public holiday known as the Day of the Vow, the Day of the Covenant, or even in some quarters, Dingaan's Day. The Day of the Vow was regarded as a religious holiday commemorating the Voortrekker victory over the Zulus at the Battle of Blood River in 1838. Now, under the new political dispensation, it is celebrated as the Day of Reconciliation. On the other side of the political spectrum, 16 December is also the anniversary of the founding in 1961 of Umkhonto we Sizwe, the Spear of the Nation. That was the armed wing of the African National Congress. To talk to us about political dynamics around the 16th of December and what this day means to the various communities in South Africa, we're joined by political analyst and associate professor of political science at the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University, Professor Jolene Steyn-Kotze. A very good morning to you, Professor. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. It's always a pleasure.
Just give us your views on the sort of history and context of Reconciliation Day in South Africa.
Reconciliation Day in South Africa, I think, builds very much in terms of when we look at issues around transitional justice, trying to get over, really a very traumatic past characterized by crimes against humanity. And one way to do that is through what we call a memorialization. So, for example, we can have museums or a public holiday where we think about our history, where we've come from and where we are, in terms of finding one another as a nation.
You mentioned crimes against humanity, the sort of history we have. A month ago, the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation here in South Africa, they did a survey where upwards of 40% of white South Africans do not believe today that apartheid was a crime against humanity. How do you view that? And then also, how do you then reconcile in a country like South Africa, if that is the position of a section or a large chunk of our nation, as it were?
Yeah, no, it was a particularly interesting finding, but I think one also has to realize that if one looks in terms of the political dynamics, white South Africans did not necessarily experience as a traumatic a reality of apartheid South Africa as, for example, black South Africans. And what we have increasingly found as well, especially in what is supposed to be de-racialized spaces like universities, for example, is that one really finds a very racialized view of citizenship, a very racialized political reality, which of course makes reconciliation very, very difficult. For example, what we see amongst university students is both black and white South African are speaking a dialogue of exclusion. White South Africans are speaking a dialogue of exclusion through policies of affirmative action and broad-based black economic empowerment, whereas black South Africans, on the other hand, are speaking a dialogue of exclusion through socio-economic inequality and racialized patterns of poverty.
How do we get these conversations to get a little bit closer to each other? It is the day of reconciliation. After all, we need to find a way, obviously, to start speaking with one tongue if this nation is going to move forward.
No, most definitely. I mean, if one thinks about it, having a very racialized worldview, even if one takes it a step further and say, that your worldview is dominated by an ethnic identity, it is extremely difficult, especially if that identity was linked or is linked to your ability to access certain socio-economic and political resources. And that includes, for example, access to quality education, access to quality health care, because inevitably the better your access to education, the more forward you are in terms of the starting line of life, if you will. So in terms of getting that conversation going, there needs to be an acknowledgement to say, look, this is our history. This is where we come from, a history of oppression. We have a situation where former oppressor and oppressed essentially need to work and live together in order to try and build a sustainable country. Of course, that dialogue needs to be conducted in a very responsible manner. We have seen increasingly your political parties using very intolerant rhetoric around issues of race and around issues of access to economic resources. Not that the arguments are invalid, but it is more a question of how you approach it.
The flip side of that is the rise of all these race incidents we've seen on social media in recent time. Do you make that a direct result of the kind of rhetoric we're seeing within our political space, with what's going in Parliament and the like? Is it a fact that the man in the street is losing a little bit of hope, or not?
It's an interesting question. I think there's an element of, for example, if one looks at your dialogue coming from people like Steve Hofmeyr, for example, really trying to claim the space of minority rights, looking for that space of inclusion. But again, the manner in which he does it and some of the statements that he makes can be seen as being politically intolerant as well as extremely irresponsible. On the other side of the spectrum, one has found, for example, the blackface incidents that we have seen at some universities across the country. And interestingly enough, you know, the debate around that, on the one hand you have predominantly white students saying, you know what, it was a joke, there's a need to get over the past. And you have, for example, black students saying, yeah, but it is disrespectful. So to a large extent for me, it speaks to a lack of knowledge about one another, and it almost speaks to a level of ignorance around the different experiences as a legacy of apartheid, if you will.
That leads us to the question to wrap it up, really. Are we, and the leaders within all of our communities, are we doing enough to reconcile and have conversations with each other? Are we mixing enough? And how do we get our leaders and those people that set the tone for us, how do we get them to really get down to the nuts and bolts of reconciliation?
You know, it's a very interesting question, because we know, for example, that your university spaces, your workplaces, and so forth are supposed to be de-racialized spaces where different groups can really get together, get to know one another a little bit through exposure to one another. However, research has shown that that is predominantly what one would find within your more middle-class strata, so to speak. And even within those, you know, so-called de-racialized spaces, one does find that people may in fact interact at the workplace, but when it comes to spending private time together, you know, having a braai, having going out for dinner and so forth, that level of interaction is somewhat lacking. On your lower socioeconomic status, your poorer classes, the level of interaction between different racial groups is even less. So I do think that there really is a need to say, look, we need to somehow get together, we need to get to know one another and find that proverbial common space where you can start moving towards building really a strong national identity. We see glimmers of it through various sports events, you know, when we, for example, won the World Cup bid and so forth. But that is not strong enough to sustain South Africans really coming together.
Thank you very much for joining us today. That's from the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University, Professor Jolene Steyn-Kotze. We're talking about reconciliation on this National Day of Reconciliation here in South Africa. It is the legacy of our first state president under the democratic dispensation, Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. Of course, we buried the great leader just over a year ago now. And we continually talk about reconciliation in South Africa. It's a conversation that's ongoing, and it's a contribution that is expected from each and every one of us in South Africa. We cannot afford to let this dream die. It is the South African dream, the dream of the Rainbow Nation, your dream, my dream, our children's dreams. Let's have a look at your tweets. What are we talking about on this day? Forever Young says, this day 20 years back, apartheid regime celebrated Dingaan's Day. Now we celebrate Reconciliation Day. Enjoy it responsibly. Ms. Bilakazi says, on this Reconciliation Day, I want to reconcile with my eating plan. It's not looking good though. Yes, we have issues with our food, don't we? Oscar says, Reconciliation Day, I boldly declare, forgive anyone that wronged me, and I'm asking for the same from you too. Life's too short to carry grudges, says Oscar. Wisdom there early in the morning, Oscar. Thank you. Donne says, Reconciliation Day. Have we really reconciled as a nation? That's the question that we're asking you on Newsroom today. Have you reconciled? Don't ask the nation to reconcile. Have you reconciled at home? Have you forgiven? Have you moved on? Ayak and Kwagazi says, celebrating Reconciliation Day, yet there is still racism in this country. Yes, there will be racists in every country. The question is there more of us that is not racist? It's an individual pursuit at the end of the day. We all have to make a contribution. We all have to forgive. We all have to move forward. It's the only way South Africa will go into the sunset. Let's take a look at the front pages now from around the globe. Most international papers, of course, looking at the Sydney siege today. The Daily Telegraph is one of the pictures that shocked the world the most yesterday. There, it's a picture where you can see a hostage falling into the arms of a tactical police officer after escaping the Lind Cafe, proved unharmed. The South China Morning Post also has a picture of some of those Sydney hostages escaping, and you can see similar images on the front page of papers in Spain this morning. In Europe, the Times is looking at that same story, leading with the bloody end to the Sydney siege. We stay with that story. Dozens of mourners have visited the scene of the Sydney siege to pay their respects to those who lost their lives. Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott has laid flowers at the makeshift memorial for the victims of the Central City Cafe siege, which left 3 people dead. The Prime Minister has confirmed the gunman at the centre of the siege was not on a terrorist watch list. Doesn't really matter, does it? Before we go to a break, let's just have a look at what else is happening around the country today. Now, in Bloemfontein, the EFF's elective conference continues at the University of the Free State, of course. In the Eastern Cape, the Department of Sport, Recreation, Art and Culture will host the 19th Heroes Marathon in Mthatha. The marathon will start at Mandela's home of Kunu. The aim of the marathon is to bring together all those who support the sacrifices made by our icon, Nelson Mandela. In KwaZulu-Natal, Henry, the Nile crocodile, celebrates his 114th birthday at Croc World on the south coast there. This makes him the oldest crocodile in captivity in the world. Now that's a nice story. You're watching Newsroom. We'll be back after a short break.
Our new waterproof smartphone takes superior photos even in low light, has PlayStation 4 remote play and up to 2 days battery life. Don't settle for good, demand great. The new Sony Xperia Z3 series.
Demand great and get the waterproof Sony Xperia Z3 smartphone with a 20-megapixel camera for only 499 Rand per month on a smart small contract this summer. Power to your best summer in 20 years. Vodacom. Power to you.
Welcome back with Newsroom on SABC News. Reconciliation, Healing and Renewal Committee will be established in Marikana today to stabilise the social situation in the Northwest Platinum Belt. Residents from different religious groups will come together at the Wonderkop Stadium to pray for reconciliation. The Marikana area, of course, first rose to prominence in 2012 when 34 mine workers were killed after a prolonged labour strike there. Earlier this year, mine workers down tools for almost 5 months, demanding a basic salary of 12,500 Rand. Let's cross now live to Marikana, where our reporter Sello Tatai is standing by. Good morning to you, Sello. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Eben.
Sello, give us the significance of today and then tell us what's the expectation, what's going to happen there today.
While even people are slowly but surely trickling in here at Wonderkop Stadium at Marikana, about 500 meters from here is the infamous Kopi where 34 miners were killed during a confrontation with police. We know that the events that unfolded pre and post Marikana are now a subject of a judicial commission of inquiry which has completed its work and is due to hand out its report to the president next year, March. But of interest here is the reconciliation day here at Marikana. You'll know that post Marikana there has been some activities of violence that have been happening here. Union members of both AMCO and the NUM have been targeted and assassinated. There's been violence across the Platinum Belt here, including Marikana and other areas where there are mining operations. But today's event is aimed at fostering peace, stability and calm here at Marikana. We're expecting dignitaries, including the Premier of the Northwest, Premier Supra Mahumapelo, to give a keynote address. But of interest, though, is that for the first time since the Marikana massacre, will see AMCU and the National Union of Mine Workers sharing a stage. You'll know that on the 16th of August, during the commemoration, the National Union of Mine Workers failed to honor the invitation by the Marikana Support Group to become part and parcel of that particular commemoration, saying that it was going to be used against them, saying that the alliance of the ANC and of COSATU and of SABC was going to be attacked at that particular commemoration. But today we're expecting a change of hearts, if one may put it that way. But over and above again is that this event today happens at a time where there is some movement on the part of Lonmin and government in addressing the many socio-economic challenges that are prevalent here at Marikana. The Lonmin mine management has announced just 2 weeks back that mine workers will be beneficiaries of 8.9% of shares. The Babomogale community, whose communities such as Marikana and Bapong fall under their jurisdiction, were also beneficiaries of 3.5% of shares. And the government has also announced that it will embark on a massive housing project which will cost something like 3.5 billion to see to it that it really addresses the many socio-economic challenges such as lack of housing, proper sanitation, water and electricity.
Selo, we saw that during this protracted strike, that there was lots of suffering all over the Platinum Belt, really. Has life now, months later, returned to normal? And tell us about the outlook on the Platinum Belt for 2015.
Well, life has returned to normality indeed here, even at Marikana. There is some movement at many of the shopping centers here at Marikana. You'll know that from 2012 until just recently, I mean in the past 5 months, where workers embarked on industrial action, you know, the poverty levels were high. People were struggling to make ends meet. You saw institutions and NGOs like Gift of the Givers coming into the party and handing out food parcels. State institutions such as SASA were also playing a pivotal role in trying to address that particular issue of people struggling to make ends meet. But since the industrial action, there hasn't, we have seen some movement with regards to how people are living. And one might say that the lives of many mine workers, including their families, have significantly improved since that industrial action. And for the first time since 2012, many mine workers will be celebrating this festive season, will be traveling to their different homes as far as Eastern Cape with smiling faces, since they've got that increment which will now take the lowest paid worker to an average of 10,000 rand after deduction.
Selo, tell us about, you mentioned earlier that AMCU and the NUM, they'll be sharing a stage today. Is there a softening of relations between these two? And that softening of relations, what would it mean on the street for the workers?
You know, that is one development that we are monitoring carefully, Eben. You know, I think both unions sharing a stage will go a long way in harmonizing the situation here at Marikana and also in fostering peace and stability here at Marikana. You'll know that since 2012, both unions have not been seeing eye to eye. Both unions, leaders rather, have been targeted and some of them being assassinated. So the two unions sharing a stage today, as I explained, will go a long way in fostering peace, will go a long way in seeing to it that there is tolerance of political views, there is tolerance of one's position ideologically, if I may put it that way, irrespective of which union you are affiliated to and irrespective of which political ideology you believe in. So we are expecting that to happen today, and I think it's something that will be gladly welcomed by both members of the two unions in trying to see to it that there is a lasting solution to peace and stability here at Marikana.
Finally, Selo, what about the victims, families of the victims that have passed? Are they still pinning their hopes on the Farlam Commission to bring closure in a way?
Well, the expectation from the families is that those who killed their loved ones at the copy on the 16th of August should be brought to book. We I'm not sure whether some of the families will be part and parcel of this particular reconciliation day, as many of them reside in as far as the Eastern Cape, but we'll continue monitoring the situation. I'm sure that if we bump into one of the family members, we'll have a 1 or 2 session with them and try to get from them what does this reconciliation day mean to them. Will it see to it that it addresses the many problems that they have encountered? You know that many of them have lost their breadwinners as a result of the confrontation that ensued between police and mine workers in 2012, where 34 miners were killed. You'll know that 10 more people were killed in the preceding week, including 2 police officers and 2 security guards. So we are expecting those families to be part and parcel of this historic event here at Marikana.
Selo, thank you very much for that contribution today. Selo Tatai coming to you live from Marikana, where, well, commemoration of those that died in the conflict in that area, but more importantly, a day of reconciliation there. Healing, a reconciliation and healing committee will be put together in Marikana to try and help everyone come together and deal with the troubled history of that area. Let's now take a look again at what you're talking about at SABC Newsroom. Please pray for the Sydney siege, says K. My thoughts and prayers are with those affected by the situation in Martin Place in Sydney. Elise says, I've been stuck at work all day and haven't been up to date with all the Sydney siege stuff, and I just saw a photo of the flowers. Kevin Peterson says, should be left to the police to sort out whatever is to be done. Media should let go for the sake of families affected. And there you think you have a picture put up by the family of one of the victims. Eric Johnson says, one of the hostages killed in Sydney was Tory Johnson, fought with gunmen and he was shot. So sad. Hashtag Sydney siege. Let's take a look at what's on Newsroom's Facebook page now today. You'll see on our Facebook page that the South African Communist Party, well, they vowed to challenge a bid by Clive Derby-Lewis to be granted medical parole. This is the Medical Parole Board to provide the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Michael Masuta, with a written recommendation by Monday. You also see a report by the Institute of Statelessness and Inclusion. Says 1 in 500 people globally has no nationality, and that Australia is on high alert after Australia's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in the capital, Canberra, was evacuated after a suspicious package was found in the building's canteen. You can find all of those stories and a whole lot more, of course, on our Newsroom Facebook page. You can also visit sabc.co.za/news for all the latest updates all the time. You're watching Newsroom. We will be back with a little bit more after a short break.
Our new waterproof smartphone takes superior photos even in low light. Has PlayStation 4 remote play and up to 2 days battery life. Don't settle for good. Demand great. The new Sony Xperia Z3 series.
Well, hello and welcome back here with Newsroom on SABC News. Let's just recap the top stories this morning. South Africans will celebrate the Day of Reconciliation today with a national event at the Sony Museum in KwaZulu-Natal. Thousands of people are expected to be part of the event, which will also see the official opening of a bridge that joins the museum and the Blood River Monument. President Jacob Zuma is expected to deliver the keynote address. A live broadcast on this channel is scheduled to start at 10:30. Now, as the country celebrates Reconciliation Day, residents of Marikana, including mine workers, have appealed to government to fast-track developmental programs in the area. They insist that government should play a more active role in fostering good relations amongst workers, irrespective of their political or union affiliation. The Northwest government is hosting the province's Reconciliation Day at Marikana in an effort to improve service delivery and address safety and security concerns. And then moving down under, 2 hostages killed in a siege at a central Sydney cafe have been hailed as heroes willing to lay down their lives so others might live in a church service mourning their deaths. Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott says the lone gunman behind the fatal Sydney cafe siege was well known to authorities because of his long history of violent crime, infatuation with extremism and mental instability. Abbott says that the Iranian-born refugee Aman Haron Mones, who died along with the 2 hostages after security forces stormed the cafe, sought to cloak his actions with the symbolism of the Islamic State. Well, remember, all those top stories and more are available on our Newsroom Facebook page, and then our journalists are out and about all over the country on this Reconciliation Day. You can keep up to date with them on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Given, over to you.
Yeah, thank you once again. Today, the 16th of December, it's a significant day in the South African calendar. South Africa's first non-racial and democratic government tasked with promoting reconciliation and national unity symbolically acknowledged the significance of this day in both the Afrikaner and liberation struggle traditions, and to rename this day as the Day of Reconciliation. On the 16th of December 1995, the Day of Reconciliation was celebrated as a public holiday in South Africa for the very first time. Various events have been organized throughout the country to commemorate this day. This year, the main event is at the Sony Museum in northern KwaZulu-Natal, where President Jacob Zuma is expected to deliver the keynote address. The Department of Arts and Culture, as well as the KwaZulu-Natal government, will celebrate the event under the theme Social Cohesion, Reconciliation and National Unity in 20 Years of Democracy. Thousands of people are expected to be part of the event, which will also see the official opening of a bridge that joins the museum and the Blood River Monument. Now, our reporter Ayanda Mhlongo joins us from Freya to keep us up to speed with what can be expected. She's with the Minister of Arts and Culture, Mr. Nathi Mthethwa, today. But Ayanda, before you do the interview, just set the scene for us quickly. Good morning.
A very good morning to you, Eben, and welcome to Ingome. It's a bit of a wet day, but in KwaZulu-Natal, rain is always a blessing. People have started trickling in here to the Ingome Museum, where, as you have said, the main event will be taking place. This is a place, Eben, of great historical significance, not only to the province of KwaZulu-Natal, but I suppose to the entire country. This is where the origins, in fact, of this day can be traced right to this area, where 176 years ago, a remarkable event took place just a few meters behind me, the Battle of Blood River. In here, KwaZulu-Natal, we call it Impi Yasengome, where over 20,000, estimated around 20,000 Zulu warriors clashed with around 500 Voortrekkers, who then defeated the Zulus on that day. So this is a very, very important day for the province of KwaZulu-Natal, and I suppose also for the country. But joining me, as you have also alluded to, the fact that there's also going to be that event of unveiling the reconciliation bridge. That will be an event that will be done by the President of the Republic, who also then, after unveiling the bridge, the President will then deliver a keynote address. But joining me now, just to speak about this day and what we can expect, I'm joined, as you said, by the Minister of Arts and Culture, Nathi Mthethwa. Minister, thank you very much for joining us this morning. As I said, you know, an event that took place here has had such a profound influence on not only the people of this area of KZN, but South Africa.
Absolutely. This has been part of the wars of resistance against colonialism. This is one of them. And this battle here, which is the Battle of Ingome, because the river is Ingome. We were told that the river became red because of blood, but it remains Ingome River. And we are saying today that after so many years, after this battle, we have reached a point in South Africa, 20 years into our democracy, where we should actually reconcile with each other. Because whilst the battle was lost by the indigenous people, which are AmaZulu in this instance, but the war was won in the final end by the democratic majority in 1994. So we are saying that we're continuing on that path of ensuring that as a nation we are together on this journey of building a socially coherent nation, as it were. So we will be opening this improved museum here, Ngome Museum, and of course the bridge, which is the bridge reconciling the two groups, those who are coming from this side, AmaZulu, and the Afrikaners, which were on the other side of the river. So the bridge is going to help as this reconciling symbol of a nation moving forward.
Very importantly, Minister, I know that in the past, events that have been held here, you would have on the one side where there's that monument, you'd have the descendants, rather, maybe one could say, of the voortrekkers, and on this side, you'd also have another event. Are you saying that now, moving forward, we're going to have a joint event, and it's not going to be two separate events like we've seen happen here in the past?
Well, firstly, it was important that we find a way of connecting the two. So the bridge is that particular symbol of connecting the two, and starting this year, encouraging everybody to know that this is one area. This was that battle was our history. We are moving forward, and we are moving South Africa forward. And in order for us to do that, we would be having this cross-pollination of walking to and fro, across the river here. And it is important for us because, as we have said, two tales have been told about what happened here. We know that at the end of the day, whatever interpretation is there, history is always looked through the prism of the conqueror or the victor. But at this point in time, we're no longer talking about victors and losers, because 1994, put an end to everything, to the struggles of resistance, to the liberation struggle. We are in a democracy today, so let us move forward.
And speaking of moving forward, just very briefly, Minister, the museum, I tell you, it's absolutely beautiful. And I'm sure you're going to want to use the museum to bolster tourism for this particular area.
Absolutely. It will be a multi-purpose. It will serve a purpose of continuously, educating our society about who we are and where we come from, so that as we forgive each other, but we don't forget where we come from, so that in future we don't, fall into the same pitfalls. But of course, people are going to be coming here, and there are going to be community activities. There are facilities here where people will come and enjoy themselves, but understanding where we are. It is going to be a tourist attraction, and many people, we believe, would be coming down here.
Minister, thank you very much for your time this morning. That was the Minister of Arts and Culture, Nathi Tetwa Eben. There's a lot that is going to be happening. As you know, that live broadcast will be taking place around 10:30 of the events that will be taking place here. So we'll continue to take you back in history. But for now, Eben, I take things back to you.
Thank you very much. That's Yana Mhlongo coming to you live from Ngome, the river, of course, in some tradition known as Blood River. In 1838, the battle that took place there will forever be etched in the memory of this country. Of course, there was a battle over the weekend also in Bloemfontein, the 4-day Economic Freedom Fighter Elective Conference. Well, it comes to an end today. Over 2,600 delegates have been meeting at the University of the Free State to elect the new leadership and deliberate on various policy issues within that party. Julius Malema and the rest of the top 6 leadership candidates were elected unopposed at the party's inaugural conference in Bloemfontein. The collective is to occupy office now for the next 5 years. During his earlier address to the conference, Malema appealed to delegates to work tirelessly towards the attainment of the party's 7 pillars, which include nationalisation of mines, land expropriation and the provision of free basic services. Now, our contributing editor here at SABC, Vuyo Mvoko, has been attending this conference, and he managed to talk to the newly elected president of the EFF, Julius Malema.
There was a whispering which was too loud just before the conference here.
What did it say? What was the whispering?
No, the provincial leaders actually came to approach me, both chairpersons and secretaries, and requested me to avail myself for the position of president, which I accepted. And I came here expecting that there will be such a nomination.
Quite fired up speech. You were quite fired up, when you made your opening address yesterday. What went through your mind as you prepared for that opening address?
Well, the speech yesterday, it was more political, and we decided that we need to give a proper diagnosis of the South African situation and how it can be resolved, including the analysis of international balance of forces and whether the socialist revolution is still on track, and who are the forces internally supporting such a revolution. We didn't concentrate much on petty politics and current affairs.
But of course you did get into the detail of some of the problems that your party is experiencing as well.
Absolutely, it's a new party. It has to go through turbulences. It has to go through a difficult path, because it's a party that contests against a party that has been there for more than 100 years. And most of the political parties in South Africa are much, much more older than our party and well experienced. And we have to then compete with them at the same level. And with our inexperienced cadres who sometimes do not know what is expected of them, because we are still in a learning process. So we had to show those challenges and then propose how we can overcome those challenges.
Could we have seen the beginning of that turbulence today when we, like about an hour or so ago, we saw some of the MPs, EFF MPs, declining nomination to the Central Command of the Economic Freedom Fighters?
No, it's not turbulences at all. They have a right to accept and to decline. It's not automatic that when you are an MP, you must be in the Central Command team of the EFF. Actually, my preference is that those who are MPs, we shouldn't dominate the Central Command team, so that we are held accountable by the Central Command team about our activities in Parliament, and we are not just law unto ourselves, because we know that we've got a political power in the structures, and we are also deployed, and therefore no one can hold us accountable. I think most of them appreciate that they can make contributions somewhere else within the organization more effectively. Others said, well, give me more time to just be a follower, an ordinary member. And others said, the president, I'm declining, and we're asking you to protect our movement. And they went further to say, we'll remain in this revolutionary organization. So it's not a turbulent at all.
But, your preference could be one thing. They may have wanted, actually, to have been part of the Central Command, but having seen how the voting went yesterday, just felt that they were going to lose anyway.
It's their cause. It is their call. They have to make that call. I want to impose myself on them. I didn't suppress them. You were here. Cameras captured everything that transpired here. People get nominated. Others make it. Others don't make it. Others decline. That's what democracy is about.
But is it ideal for a party as young as yours to already sort of see people, first conference, you over a year, just over a year old, is it ideal to have the kind of thing that we saw about an hour ago, where clearly there was a group of people that were unhappy.
That's good. That's democracy. It's a living organization. It's not stuck. It's constituted by individuals, and they all have different ideas on what should the future look like. And elections are emotional view. People become so emotional, particularly the youth. They are energized, they are highly agitated, and they hope that their candidate should emerge. And if they don't emerge, they try to sing because they think they're not getting the necessary support. And what is more nice about it is that when we stand up to say, please, please restrain yourself, they still sit down. We went through the nomination of 35 additional members. It was a highly charged process, and we're happy that we concluded it without a chair fly. And that's a new organization you're talking about, a year-old plus organization which can still hold it together even when the situation is so charged. Give it to the EFF, man.
So you do not think, or you are convinced in your own mind, that what we saw about an hour ago or so is not the beginning of the sort of stuff we've seen in COPE, for instance, and other parties that started very well but then collapsed sooner than everyone thought they would?
But COPE didn't start well on this stage. I mean, this was the same platform, so you can't compare this with COPE. You were here, top 6 elected, uncontested, peacefully. You were here, election of 35 additional members elected peacefully. There is nothing comparable between EFF and COPE, and there's no even a single sign of such. Only those who suffer from uncontrollable ambition for power and believe that it's me or nothing, those are the individuals who will be disgruntled and leave because they are not elected. There's nothing we can do to help them. But this is, a very good start, and it's really inspiring some of us. And the message we received from these delegates is that you are doing very well and continue to represent us.
With the benefit of hindsight, could you not have perhaps intervened ahead of the conference, even if it's to say, because we need everyone, we need this organization to be united, even though democracy you believe very strongly that democracy should take its course, that for the good of the party, maybe it should not have been seen to have been a slate where winner takes all. In other words, tried to go to those people, even though they were in the minority, to sort of say to the members, please, let's make sure that everyone is accommodated.
If I do that, you were going to come to me. Look at how you speak so well about it. You were going to be the one that, but we heard that you were going around telling people to tell people not to stand and forcing them to take this one and that one, and therefore you are a dictator. I touch it, there is a problem. I leave it, there is a problem. So I must just leave democracy to the members to decide. I'm not going to go to the members and say, no, for the sake of unity and all that. That is a micromanagement of democracy, and we'll never allow that. Let the members decide. And all those who contested actually were making that call, that let the membership decide.
Of course, that was Julius Malema, the leader of the EFF, newly elected now at the conference in the Bloemfontein, speaking to our contributing editor, Vuyo Mvoko. Let's just take a quick final look at some of your comments on our Twitter feed. And Mahar says, we are inferior to our ancestors in the derivation of our birth and in nearly all other particulars. Reconciliation, says Mahar. Happy day of reconciliation. Enjoy responsible good morning. Thank you. Yes, that's the message to everyone. Wishing everybody a blessed day of reconciliation. Hashtag South Africa from JBR Kutua. Game says, reconciliation and national unity. Yes, that's what we would like having South Africa. Saskia talks about wishing you peace and love. Yes. that's pretty much what we're wishing everybody, some peace and love on this day. What are you doing?
Well, I'm
today?
heading back to Pretoria all the way, and I'll be spending the day with some family and friends.
Well, my day is not so exciting, but I wish some of you who are traveling today, of course lots of people will be traveling to holiday destinations on this day. Keep it safe and be patient out on the roads. We really need to, well, start our reconciliation on the roads this weekend. But thank you very much for joining us.
Yes, the Business Newsroom, and we're broadcasting live on Channel 404. We're also live streaming on YouTube all day long, where you can catch the show again if you missed it. Remember,
this is Newsroom,
where we love it in the morning.
Bye.